2 weeks ago, I sat across from my lawyer and signed the final divorce papers. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. The woman I'd spent 12 years with was officially out of my life, and the only thing I felt was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm rips through your house and you're standing in the wreckage realizing you're still alive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started falling apart. My wife and I met when I was 26 and she was 24. I was finishing my surgical residency at Northwestern Memorial in Chicago, running on 4 hours of sleep and enough coffee to kill a horse. She walked into the hospital cafeteria one Tuesday morning because her marketing agency was pitching a campaign to our hospital's PR department. I remember she was wearing this navy blue blazer and laughing at something her colleague said, and I swear the fluorescent lights in that cafeteria had never made anyone look that good before. My buddy Rich, another resident, caught me staring and said, "Go talk to her, or I will." So I did. I walked up to her table, introduced myself like an idiot with a coffee stain on my scrubs, and somehow convinced her to get dinner with me that Friday. 6 months later, she moved into my apartment. A year after that, we got married at a small venue in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, with 40 guests and her mother crying in the front row. Not happy tears either. Her mother never liked me much. She thought surgeons were arrogant, and honestly, she wasn't entirely wrong about the profession, but I always treated her daughter like she was the best thing that ever happened to me, because she was. Or at least I thought she was. For 11 years, we built a life together. I made attending surgeon, then got promoted to head of the trauma department at 35. She climbed the ladder at her agency, eventually becoming a senior marketing manager handling major accounts. We bought a house in Lincoln Park, renovated the kitchen ourselves one summer, adopted a golden retriever named Biscuit. We were that couple, the one our friends envied at dinner parties, the one that made single people either hopeful or annoyed. The first crack appeared about 4 months before everything blew up. My wife came home one evening and told me her agency had brought in a new creative director named Ethan to oversee her division. She was frustrated. She'd been expecting that promotion herself, and instead they hired some hotshot from New York with a big portfolio and a bigger ego. For the first 2 weeks, she came home venting about him every night, how he changed her campaign strategies, how he talked over her in meetings, how he took credit for her team's ideas. I listened, rubbed her shoulders, told her she was brilliant and he'd figure that out soon enough. Then something shifted. Around week 3, the complaints stopped. She came home one evening and said, "Actually, Ethan had a really good point about the Henderson account today. We ended up collaborating on the pitch and it went great." I said, "That's wonderful." I meant it. I had no reason not to. But over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Small things that most husbands would probably miss, but surgeons are trained to notice details. She started going to the gym more often, except she never seemed sore afterward. She changed her phone password, which she'd never done in 11 years. She started working late 2 or 3 nights a week, and when I called the office line around 8 one evening, nobody picked up. She began sleeping in a t-shirt instead of one of my old scrub tops, which had been her thing since we started dating. And the most telling sign of all, she stopped reaching for me at night. Not just physically, emotionally. She'd come to bed, turn on her side, and fall asleep without saying goodnight. For a woman who used to wrap herself around me like a vine every single night, that silence was deafening. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself the stress of the new boss was wearing her down. I told myself a lot of things because the alternative was too painful to consider. But the surgeon in me doesn't ignore symptoms, and these symptoms were pointing toward a diagnosis I didn't want to make. Now here's where things took a turn I didn't expect. About 3 weeks before our 12th wedding anniversary, we had a series of break-ins in our neighborhood. 2 houses on our block got hit while the owners were at work. I decided to install a security camera system. Nothing crazy, just 4 cameras covering the front door, back door, garage, and the living room. I set them up on a Saturday while my wife was at brunch with her friends. The system was cloud-based, accessible from my phone, with motion-activated recording. I told my wife about the outdoor cameras. I didn't mention the indoor ones. Not because I was suspicious at that point. I just figured if someone broke in, I wanted to see where they went inside the house. At least that's what I told myself. 10 days later, I was on a 48-hour shift at the hospital. It was a brutal stretch. 3 emergency surgeries back-to-back, a car accident victim who didn't make it, and a 6-year-old who did. By 2 in the morning, I was sitting in the break room trying to decompress when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the living room camera. I almost ignored it, probably Biscuit chasing his tail again. But something made me open the app. What I saw on that screen will stay with me for the rest of my life. My wife walked into our living room with a man. He had his arm around her waist. She was laughing, leaning into him the way she used to lean into me. They sat down on our couch, the couch we'd picked out together at Restoration Hardware, and he pulled her close. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her. Not a peck, not a friendly gesture. A deep, lingering kiss that made my stomach drop to the floor. Then she took his hand and led him upstairs. Toward our bedroom. I sat in that break room staring at my phone for I don't know how long. 5 minutes. 20 minutes. Time stopped making sense. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone twice. A nurse walked in, saw my face, and asked if I'd lost a patient. I told her I was fine. I was anything but fine. The rational part of my brain, the part that had carried me through medical school and 15 years of surgery, kicked in before the emotional part could take over. I did not drive home. I did not call her. I did not send a single text. Instead, I did something that probably saved me in court later. I screenshotted the notification timestamp. Then I went into the cloud storage and downloaded every single clip from that camera going back to the day I installed it. What I found made me physically sick. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't the second time. In the 10 days since I'd installed those cameras, my wife had brought this man into our home 4 separate times. Every single time corresponded with a night I was on call at the hospital. She had a pattern. I'd leave for my shift, and within 2 hours his car would pull into our garage. He'd stay until around 5 in the morning, then leave before sunrise. She had it down to a science. The next morning I called my buddy Dave, a family law attorney I'd known since college. I told him everything. He said 3 words that became my mantra for the next 3 weeks. Document everything first. So that's what I did. I documented everything. I saved every camera clip to a secure cloud drive. I pulled our phone records and found hundreds of texts and calls between my wife and a number I didn't recognize. I checked our shared credit card statements and found charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels downtown on nights she'd told me she was working late, and a jewelry purchase from 2 weeks ago that I never received. She'd bought him a gift. With our money. Through the phone records, I was able to identify the man. His name was Ethan Morrison, 41 years old, creative director at my wife's agency. The same man she'd been complaining about 4 months ago. The same man she'd said was arrogant, dismissive, and difficult to work with. The same man who was now sleeping in my bed while I operated on dying people at 3 in the morning. Here's the detail that turned my anger into something cold and calculating. Ethan Morrison was married. His wife's name was Rachel. They had 2 kids, ages 7 and 4. He lived in a nice house in Evanston. His wife was a 3rd-grade teacher. I found her through social media in about 10 minutes. She looked kind. She looked like someone who packed her kids' lunches with little notes inside, and her husband was spending his nights in another woman's bed. I spent the next 2 weeks executing my plan with the precision of a surgical procedure. Step 1. I met with Dave and we began preparing divorce papers. Because Illinois is a no-fault state, the infidelity itself wouldn't drastically change the financial outcome, but Dave assured me the evidence would matter for credibility and could influence discretionary decisions on asset division. Step 2. I quietly moved my personal savings into a separate account. Step 3. I gathered every piece of evidence into an organized file. Step 4, and this was the one I deliberated over the longest, I reached out to Rachel Morrison. I sent her a message through social media. Simple and direct. Mrs. Morrison, my name is Marcus. I'm a surgeon at Northwestern Memorial. I believe your husband and my wife have been having an affair. I have video evidence. I understand this is devastating to hear from a stranger, and I'm sorry to be the one telling you this. If you'd like to talk, here's my number. She called me within the hour. She was crying before she even said hello. But underneath the tears, I heard something else. I heard a woman who already knew, who'd been ignoring the same signs I had. The late nights. The new cologne. The phone turned face down on the nightstand. We talked for 2 hours. By the end of the call, we had a plan. Our 12th wedding anniversary fell on a Saturday. For weeks, my wife had been saying we should do something special. Isn't that something? She was sleeping with another man 3 nights a week and still wanted to celebrate our anniversary. The audacity would have been impressive if it weren't so nauseating. I told her I'd make reservations at Gibson's, her favorite steakhouse downtown. She was thrilled. She went out and bought a new dress. She got her hair done. She was practically glowing when she came downstairs that evening. She looked beautiful. I'm not going to pretend she didn't. That was part of what made this so painful. We arrived at the restaurant at 7. I'd requested a specific table near the back, a quiet corner with good sightlines to the rest of the dining room. What my wife didn't know was that 3 tables away, Rachel Morrison was sitting with her husband, Ethan. Rachel had told him it was a date night, that her mother was watching the kids, that she wanted to reconnect. He'd agreed, probably out of guilt. They were already seated when we walked in. My wife didn't notice them. Why would she? As far as she knew, her affair was perfectly compartmentalized. Work life, home life, affair life. 3 neat little boxes that never touched. We ordered drinks. She got a glass of Pinot Grigio. I got a whiskey neat. We made small talk. She told me about a new client her team had landed. She told me Biscuit had chewed up another pair of her shoes. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand and said, 12 years. Can you believe it? I looked at her face, that face I'd loved for over a decade, and I said, no, I really can't. After the appetizers arrived, I set my phone on the table. I'd loaded the camera footage onto it earlier that day, 4 clips, each one showing her bringing Ethan into our house. I pressed play on the first one and slid the phone toward her. Happy anniversary, I said. I got you something special. The color drained from her face in stages. First her cheeks went white, then her lips, then even her ears seemed to lose their color. She watched 15 seconds of the first clip before she grabbed the phone and tried to turn it off. Her hands were shaking too badly to work the screen. Where did you get this? She whispered. From the security cameras I installed 3 weeks ago, I said. The ones you didn't know about. Would you like to see the other 3 clips? There's a really good one from last Thursday. You wore that red dress I bought you for your birthday. She started crying, not the quiet, dignified tears you see in movies. The ugly kind. The kind that comes with snot and gasping and mascara running down your face in a crowded restaurant. Marcus, please, let me explain, she said. I held up my hand. There's nothing to explain. I watched you bring him into our home 4 times in 10 days. I checked the phone records. Hundreds of calls and texts. I found the hotel charges on our credit card. The jewelry you bought him. With our money. There is literally nothing you could say right now that I haven't already figured out on my own. She was spiraling. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. He pursued me and I was weak, and I'm so sorry, Marcus. I am so sorry. I leaned forward. A mistake is burning dinner. A mistake is forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning. Sleeping with your boss in our bed while I'm at the hospital saving people's lives is not a mistake. That's a choice. You made that choice over and over again, every single time I left for a night shift. You had a system. You timed it perfectly. That's not weakness. That's planning. Then I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket. The divorce papers. I set them on the table next to her untouched salad. These are already filled out. Dave prepared them. All you need to do is sign. I've been more than fair with the terms, all things considered. She stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. You can't be serious. Marcus, we can work through this. People go to counseling. People recover from this. I shook my head slowly. Some people do. I'm not one of them. I've spent the last 3 weeks watching those videos over and over, and every single time it feels exactly the same as the first time. That feeling isn't going to go away with counseling. Trust me. I'm a doctor. That's when I saw it happen. 3 tables away, Rachel Morrison stood up from her chair. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could see it. She was holding her own phone up to Ethan's face. He went rigid. Then he started looking around the restaurant, panicked, like a trapped animal. His eyes swept the room and landed on me. I watched the recognition hit him. He knew who I was. Not because we'd met, but because he'd been in my house enough times to have seen our wedding photos on the wall. Our eyes locked for about 3 seconds. I didn't look away. He did. Rachel gathered her purse, said something sharp and final to Ethan, and walked out of the restaurant. She didn't cry. She didn't make a scene. She just left, and somehow that was more devastating than any amount of screaming would have been. Ethan sat there alone at his table, staring at his phone, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire life collapse in real time. My wife saw none of this. She was too busy pleading with me, offering every promise in the book. She'd quit her job. She'd go to therapy. She'd do anything. What about the house? She asked. What about Biscuit? What about our life? I pulled out my phone again and showed her one more thing. A screenshot of Ethan's social media profile. His wife, his 2 kids, his 7-year-old daughter's gap-toothed smile in a soccer uniform. You see this woman? I said. Her name is Rachel. She's a 3rd-grade teacher. Those are her children. Your boyfriend has been lying to both of you. And right now, 3 tables behind you, she just found out everything. You want to know who told her? I did. 3 weeks ago. My wife turned around so fast she nearly knocked over her wine glass. She saw Ethan sitting alone, his face in his hands. She turned back to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not guilt. Not sadness. Fear. You planned this, she breathed. You planned all of this. I picked up my whiskey and finished it. I'm a surgeon. Planning is what I do. I left the restaurant alone. I walked 4 blocks to my car in the November cold and sat behind the wheel for a long time without starting the engine. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't satisfied. I just felt empty. The kind of empty that comes when you remove something that's been growing inside you for 12 years and suddenly there's this hole where it used to be and nothing to fill it with. The next 3 months were mechanical. My wife moved out of the house within a week. She stayed with her mother, just like I figured she would. Her mother called me twice. The first time to tell me I was making a mistake. The second time to tell me my wife was a mess and I should feel guilty about it. I told her I was sorry her daughter was hurting, but I wasn't the one who caused it, and I wasn't going to set myself on fire to keep someone warm who'd been lying to my face for months. My wife tried to contact me several times. Texts, voicemails, even a handwritten letter she left in our mailbox. The letter was 4 pages long. She talked about how Ethan had pursued her relentlessly, how she'd felt neglected because of my long hours at the hospital, how the affair made her feel seen and alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. I read every word. Then I put it through the paper shredder. Not out of cruelty, because I knew that if I kept it, I'd read it again at 2 in the morning when I was lonely, and I'd start to believe her version. And her version was a lie she told herself so she could sleep at night. Dave handled the legal side efficiently. Since we didn't have kids, the process was relatively straightforward. She got a fair settlement. I kept the house. She kept her car and half the savings. Biscuit stayed with me. That last part she actually cried about, which told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. She didn't cry that hard about losing me. As for Ethan Morrison, karma came for him fast and without mercy. Rachel filed for divorce within 2 weeks. She got full custody of the kids. Through Rachel, I also learned that she'd reported Ethan's conduct to his company's HR department. Turns out Ethan wasn't just my wife's creative director, he was technically her direct supervisor. The agency had a strict policy against supervisory relationships, and when HR investigated, they found that Ethan had a pattern. My wife wasn't his first subordinate. He'd done this at his previous company in New York too. They fired him immediately. My wife wasn't terminated, but she was put on administrative leave pending the investigation, and when the details came out about the affair happening during business trips the company had paid for, they let her go too. Fired for cause. No severance, no reference. Rachel and I kept in touch through the process. Not romantically, nothing like that. Just 2 people who'd been hit by the same car comparing injuries. She told me that after the divorce, Ethan had actually reached out to my wife, and for a brief moment my wife thought he was coming to be with her. He wasn't. He called to blame her. He said she'd ruined his marriage, his career, his relationship with his kids. He said if she'd just been more careful, none of this would have happened. My wife apparently hung up on him, which was probably the smartest thing she'd done in 6 months. Last I heard from her mother, my wife moved back to her parents' house in Milwaukee. She's been struggling to find work because in the marketing world, word travels fast and her reputation took a serious hit. Her mother told me she's been seeing a therapist twice a week, and that she's deeply remorseful. I hope that's true. I don't wish suffering on her. I just don't want her anywhere near my life. As for me, I'm doing all right. The house feels too big for 1 person and a dog, but I'm getting used to the quiet. I went back to working my regular shifts at the hospital. I started cooking actual meals instead of ordering takeout every night. Last month, I built a bookshelf in the garage, by hand, just to have something to do with the empty hours. Biscuit sleeps at the foot of my bed now, right in the spot where my wife used to be, and honestly, he's better company. He's never lied to me. He's never pretended to be somewhere he wasn't. And when I come home from a long shift, he's always there. If I've learned anything from this whole mess, it's this. Pay attention. Pay attention to the small changes. The phone turned face down, the new passwords, the nights that don't add up. Pay attention not because you should live in suspicion, but because the people who are supposed to love you don't always deserve the trust you give them. And if you ever find yourself sitting in a hospital break room at 2 in the morning watching your life fall apart on a 4-inch phone screen, remember that you have a choice too. You can crumble, or you can plan. I chose to plan, and I'd make the same choice again every single time. One last thing. About a week after the divorce was finalized, I found something in the back of my closet. A small box I didn't recognize. Inside was a watch, an expensive one. Engraved on the back it said, "To my Marcus, happy 12th, all my love forever." She must have hidden it there before everything happened. Before she knew about the cameras, before the restaurant, before any of it. She'd bought me an anniversary gift while she was sleeping with another man. I stared at that watch for a long time. Then I put it back in the box, drove to the lake, and threw it as far as I could into the water. I watched it disappear beneath the surface, and for the first time in months, I took a breath that didn't hurt.